Chapter 1. The Beginning. Since the beginning of the ninth grade school year, Matthew and Demas had been friends. They shared many of the same classes, math, woodshop, and English, with Mr. Flynn, which was their favorite. Mr. Flynn loved literature and the imagination. He also loved extracting from his students, especially Matthew, fantastic imaginary worlds. The first long assignment had been a 7-page creative story on any imaginary land. Matthew wrote 10 pages about a land called Mephasod, with an evil tyrant named Lepor, who made all the people slaves. They were beaten and whipped as they mined the mountains for gold and silver. The hero, Ramash, saved the whole world with his companion Shade and their magic swords. Mr. Flynn was so impressed with Matthew's paper that he sent it in to be published in the local newspaper. It was Matthew's attention to detail and realism that caught his teacher's eye. Demas, meanwhile, wrote a 5.5-page story about the giant 8-legged people of Footballia who ate geeks and nerds for breakfast and used their bones as toothpicks. His story was not sent to be published, nor was it given a passing grade. It was Tuesday, which meant that they had basic math with Mrs. Grunthenall. She was a large woman, short but wide, with the old-fashioned glasses that sat at the end of her bulbous nose. She wasn't mean, she was just stern. She didn't like fooling around, and she didn't like it when kids didn't see the importance of math in everyday life. Matthew and Demas were usually bored, which got them into lots of trouble. Mrs. Grunthenall had seated them at opposite ends of the room a long time ago due to, quote, childish antics. The bell rang just as the two boys darted in and sat down. Their desks screeched on the tile floor. Mrs. Grunthenall shot them one of those "don't come in late again" looks. She cleared her throat and began the class. Her voice was flat and monotone, the kind that made kids go nuts. Matthew once caught himself singing the Barney theme song just to keep awake. I love you, you love me, we're a drooling family. Turn to page 84, she said. Today we're going to see how... Demas, she interrupted herself. Demas, this is math, not science. She pointed to her math book. Demas noticed he had a science book out. Yeah, Mrs. G. Sorry, I was trying to correlate the concepts of science with the interrelations of math, ma'am. She looked at him and almost cracked a smile. And what correlations did you find? Well, he stuttered. How about correlating on your own time and getting your math book out? That, Mrs. G, is a great idea, and one that I will attend to right now. He smiled and pulled his math book out of his backpack. Mrs. Grunthenall turned to the board and wrote, page 84. Okay, on page 84 there are a few problems. I want you to try them on your own before I explain. I would like to know what you know about this subject, okay? Go ahead and begin. You will not be graded on these. The class studiously began solving the problems. Matt, whispered Demas. Matthew ignored him. Mrs. Grunthenall was at the board drawing numbers and rewriting the problems from the book. Matt, whispered Demas again, this time a bit louder. Turning his head slightly, Matthew looked at Demas, who had a spitballer straw in his mouth, poised for launch. Thwap! A perfect shot hit Matthew's cheek. Demas giggled like a 5-year-old at a burp. The spitball was wet and newly chewed and stuck nicely to Matthew's face. Matthew smiled and threw the spitball back at Demas. Matthew! Yelled Mrs. Grunthenall. Her lips mashed against each other like a hydraulic press. Her bright red lipstick was usually smeared on her teeth and made her look like she was eating raw meat. But Matthew tried, but the teacher was all over him. What do you think you're doing? Her short, round body waddled down the row to Matthew's seat. Yeah, Matthew, piped Demas with a serious look. You could have poked out my eye. Demas, said Mrs. Grunthenall sternly, turning around. That's enough. She turned back to Matthew, who was sliding further into his chair. Detention, tomorrow. She pivoted and walked back to the board. Matthew smiled. Demas laughed. Mrs. Grunthenall grunted. She was like a warthog in red. Demas once taped a sign on her back that read, "Lights on for safety." She knew it was Demas, and he spent 2 days with her after school writing, "I will not tape signs on teachers' backs. It is wrong and disrespectful." With all their antics and mischief, Matthew and Demas were average students, and more importantly, they were friends. Good friends. Matthew had just moved to the area in the summer and began going to church, where he first met Demas, and then he started school in the fall. Both liked church and sports, so they got along great. They often played one-on-one tackle football in Matthew's backyard, which was quite large and flat, perfect for games. Demas usually won, but Matthew always had a good time and even drew blood on occasion. They would spend Saturday afternoons playing warrior, using sticks as swords and garbage can lids as shields. Matthew was the planner and fighter. Demas was the sorcerer who blew things up. The evil bad lord was always destroyed, and the treasure split between the two brave masters of the woods. Even as the school year began, they still went to the woods in the afternoons. Somehow, they both knew that this game was all too real. In some ways, it felt like a training ground for the real battles to come. One particular afternoon, Matthew was wielding his stick against the evil lord Gorgon, which was really just an old rotting pine tree. He was hacking at the tree, and pieces of bark and rotten wood were flying out. Demas came leaping to the tree and threw a large rock at it so that the tree began falling. He pretended the rock was a lightning bolt that came from his hands. As they were massacring the evil Lord Gorgon, they both suddenly stopped because they felt as if they were being watched. "Do you feel like someone's out here?" Demas asked. "Yeah," said Matthew. "Come on." He grabbed his stick tightly and began walking. Demas grabbed his stick nearby. "Did you see something?" "No, but I feel as if someone is watching us." "Is it Danny Cortez, you think?" Demas asked. "Nah, he's too loud. Plus, he would have tried to scare us like he did a few weeks ago, remember?" "Yeah," Demas smiled. "He was so loud, clomping through the woods, stepping on branches like a horse, he couldn't sneak up on Gorgon." Matthew smiled. They continued walking until they came to a ridge where they could see down the mountain. There was no one in sight. "Maybe our imaginations are too good," Demas stated. "I guess," Matthew replied. "Come on, Gorgon's probably amassing a new army." As Matthew turned to go back, he stepped into a spider's web. He freaked. He dropped his stick and began clawing at the web. "Ah, get it off! Get it off!" he yelled. He was in a panic, throwing his arms wildly and shrieking. Demas ran over. "Whoa, whoa, 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 I got you, man!" He picked at the web. "Calm down, Matt." "Oh, I hate spiders," Matthew said. He slowly calmed himself. Demas pulled a long thread from Matthew's hair. "You can overcome this fear, man. Remember, I can do all things, through Christ who strengthens me. Beep. This is a hidden shield. Beep." "Yeah, I remember," Matthew said glumly. "But I learned that when I was sitting in a chair in Sunday school, not in the woods with a spider in my hair." "True. It is easier to learn Bible verses in the comfort of Sunday school with cookies and Coke," Demas laughed. "Yeah," Matthew chuckled. "Did I tell you that I hate spiders?" "Well, I bet there's a spider somewhere saying, 'I hate humans,'" Demas smiled. He picked at the globs of white web that clung lifelessly to Matthew's clothes. "Yeah," Matthew chuckled. "I hope Gorgon hasn't got himself a bunch of giant spiders," Demas added. He plucked a long string of the spider's web from Matthew's hair. "Me either," Matthew said. "Me either." That's the end of chapter 1.